Today's episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast is brought to you by Poor Richard's Cafe and Star Local Media. Poor Richard's Cafe, Plano's oldest restaurant since 1973. They are open daily from 5:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., serving the three most important meals of the day: breakfast, lunch, and dessert. It is true Texas home-style cooking made with love and grit. That is Poor Richard's Cafe, located off of Avenue K in Plano. Welcome to another episode of the Star Local Media High School Sports Podcast. My name is Matt Welch, being joined by Taylor Ragland and Brian Murphy. And gentlemen, we are reaching that time of the summer where there just really isn't anything going on right now. I guess, this week is when State 7-on-7 takes place. So once that concludes, then I guess for us next month, we'll kind of shift our coverage to more kind of club sport-centric stuff. But in the meantime, as far as the podcast goes, one thing that we've done for the last several years, just as a nice little precursor to the upcoming school year, is our ongoing summer question series, our all too comprehensive question series, where we go, how deep is this? 50, 55, 60, 66 questions, something crazy like that. As many different angles to attack these districts as you could conceivably think of. And just going to take a couple questions that we've been rolling out from that and just bring them to the open air, because it's the newspaper. There's only a finite amount of space in the newspaper that we can discuss these things. So let's take a couple questions and just see where the discussion goes. We'll do two questions, one in the first half, one in the second half, see what we can do with that. I like this question every year when we ponder this question, just because it's one of those things that just as far as the cyclical nature of high school sports, it's always it's fun to see which teams are able to bounce back and whatnot. So the question is, which teams that missed the playoffs last school year, 2018-2019, will make the playoffs in the upcoming school year? So fire off a team, guys. Who do you foresee having a big bounce back year?
None of them.
Aw, well, that's no fun.
For me, man, I don't know. 9-6A is hard to do this for because all the teams are so good and there's so much parity in so many sports that it seems like,
those are the ones that where I think, though,
any of them could.
That's where you probably get the most turnover in districts like that.
But I guess my 9-6A team and I guess my Plano team would be Plano East softball. It's hard to imagine a program like that that's so, it's a perennial contender. They seem to be good every year. And the way they've missed the playoffs the last two seasons, by a game without a play-in game 2 years ago, and then this year, obviously, they lost the play-in game to McKinney Boyd and Kinsey Cackley. No shame in that. But I think that's just a program, regardless of turnover. They definitely lose some big-time pieces. They lose Ronnie Ramos. They lose Nicole High.
Oh, yeah.
They lose some pieces that are going to be hard to replace, but they also bring back Carson Armijo. They bring back a lot of talent. Elsewhere, Mari Kennedy really, I think, had a pretty good season at the top of the order. Started hitting left-handed and was kind of a spark plug up there. They bring back...
we started hitting left-handed?
Started hitting left-handed. Before, she hit the entire high school season left-handed, I believe, but had to learn between high school seasons. She's just so fast. Okay. And, if you're athletic enough to where, and softball is one of those sports, if you can just teach them to get the bat on the ball from that side of the plate, it's crazy.
What a unique talent to be able to make a change like that. I can't even imagine, hey, Matt, shoot a basketball left-handed next year.
Figure this out. But, she is just so fast that, it was worth it. And if she can just put the ball in play, she's on, who knows, some crazy percentage of the time. But, it's just one of those things where, like I said, that program's too good year in and year out to imagine them missing the playoffs 3 years in a row. And I think just the landscape of 9-6A softball is going to change a lot. West and Tatum Boyne aren't going to be this powerhouse at the top of the district anymore. There's really no team that stands out to me as, okay, here's your district champion. That doesn't exist really. There's going to be some teams that are usually good. West, I think, will be fine. They lose Tatum Boyd, arguably the best player in program history, but I think there's some room for parity there. I think that it's going to be a battle. I think it's going to be tight, and I think that, like I said, East is just one of those programs where it's hard to imagine them continuing to miss the postseason. So who knows? If
you just play the odds to a team that is, finished fifth, I guess, these past 2 years, and has come so close. Right. Eventually, the other shoe's going to drop, and just the things will even out, and and that'll be enough for them to finally get over the hump. Because it just feels like yesterday that team was making a run to the deep in the regional tournament and giving Keller a good series, and it's just been a weird twist of fate for Plano East softball. Brian, where did you land on this? What was one team team that sprung to mind for you?
So 2 years ago, Frisco Centennial boys soccer. They win the district. That same year that Wakeland finished fourth when they went on to win the state, and Centennial went on to play against Wakeland in that third round game. Awesome game. Centennial, they brought back a lot of guys. Yeah, they lost a couple key players there, but they brought back most of that team. Ethan Unger and Nick Wainzer. The list is on and on and on. And they don't make the playoffs this year. And that says a lot about soccer in Frisco. They finished fifth. They only lost 2 district games. But the fact that they tied 5 really killed them. You win 11 games in district, you think you're going to make the playoffs. Albeit they play 18 games in that district. But the fact that Centennial, some people even told me, Centennial might still be the best team in the district. And they got 5th. They got 5th in the playoffs, or in the standings, and missed the playoffs. And you had teams like Heritage and Frisco surge ahead. And I just think they come back. To a little bit of dominance next year. I think they'll be up there, par with Wakeland. They return Nick Wainzer, who's midfield player of the year, who I think is a heavy candidate, along with guys like Todd Fuller and some of those Wakeland guys for MVP next year. Centennial, it was a rare thing, one-time thing. I think they'll be right back in the mix, competing not just for a playoff spot, but for a district title next year.
Taylor, you mentioned Plano East, and I was thinking with Plano Senior, they only made the playoffs in 3 of the 8 standings-based sports last year.
It's a weird year, man.
Yeah, 3 for for the state's 4th largest high school. I think that there's a couple teams. There are a couple teams that finish right outside that I think that these stars could line for a couple bounce back years for the football team and the boys soccer team at Plano Senior. The boys soccer team, man, this was a weird year. You talk about just an abnormal confluence of events. Plano Senior boys soccer had 23 points accrued in district play. Yep. That would have been enough to place 3rd in their district the year before. It was 5th though this year, and it went right down to the the last. They were basically 2 minutes away from making the playoffs. If they had, it was a game against McKinney Boyd in their penultimate game of the season. If they just got a tie there, then that would have been enough to make the playoffs. They gave up a goal with 2 minutes left, and that ultimately was what kept them out in the very end. And they're gonna bring back the heavy majority of that roster next year. And I don't know, just you get that kind of continuity, and as good a year as they had. I can't foresee that if they play as well as they did this year, next year that'll be enough to get into the playoffs, I think, for sure. And then with the football team, we almost ran into this doomsday scenario a couple years ago. There's no way that all 3 Plano ISD schools could miss the playoffs in football, is there?
Man, I don't know.
It happens.
Just everything with Plano Senior. I think they're the clear favorite as far as the best PISD program across the board next year. I think East takes a step back in a lot of places. West takes a step back in a lot of places. Not that those schools can't, be good and come out of nowhere.
But if West takes a step back, that would be.
Yeah.
It might stay on level ground. Yeah. It would be odd if they took a step back after being 0-26.
Across the board, not just in football. In general, because the volleyball team will make the postseason again. Yeah. But outside of that, softball's up in the air. They made the postseason this year. Outside of that, in the individual sports, it could be a weird year for PISD again. Following a down year this year. But I think senior, like you said, is set up for some redemption in a couple areas.
And then you look at a program like Allen Volleyball, which had just everything that you talk about, just an injury bug that just hit a team in just the worst way possible last year. That was a program I went to check. The last time that Allen Volleyball missed the playoffs in consecutive years, you'd have to go back to 1992. Last time that happened. So the odds definitely favor a bounce back year for the Lady Eagles. It was a young team that, again, all of their senior leadership was just hamstrung by injuries. Again, the kind of year where anything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. You assume that a lot of that youth is going to become, a bit more battle tested this coming season. A lot of those girls were thrown into the fire of a district where, let's be real, you could not afford to be a team of freshmen and sophomores with some of the heavy hitters that 9-6A volleyball had. Now, to be fair, as I kind of survey the landscape of that volleyball district, I'm not entirely sure who's gonna miss the playoffs because I mean you expect West and Prosper are still going to be really good. Plano's yet to miss the playoffs under head coach Terry Minnis, and I recall I think McKinney does lose a few of their better players, but there's still going to be plenty of talent coming back there. And Boyd was right on the cusp last year too.
And wasn't McKinney a super surprise? Like even Kendrick didn't expect that coming. With them the hot start that they had. Then they start like 6-2, and their only losses came to Prosper. Through the first half of district play, and we were like, man, what the heck, McKinney? Why are they in the mix? And so I guess that's that hurt Allen's chances. Also, when you have a team surge like that, you got to expect McKinney won't do what they did last year.
I mean, I don't know.
Who knows,
there's still a lot of talent there.
That district's really good. I mean, that's probably. I mean, you can look at football and Allen being in that district and some other sports, but top to bottom, that volleyball district is maybe 9-6A's best. I think. I mean, it's crazy.
And then, just another aspect as far as looking at, the trends that might lead to potential bounce back years is when you have a team that made the playoffs for a really long time and then has the one down year and just the odds that they get back on track. And you look at programs like the Flower Mound girls basketball team and the Rowlett boys basketball team. The Flower Mound girls had made the playoffs for 6 straight years prior to missing out last year. And then the Rowlett boys had made the playoffs 7 straight years before missing out last season. And those teams bring back a ton of talent. With the Flower Mound girls, they only really lost 2 key contributors. They returned players like Mackenzie Schott, Kayla Wallace, Sarah Edmondson, and then that Rowlett boys basketball team had a massive junior class. So they'll have the majority of their rotation back. You wonder how that district's going to look. Period. With South Garland losing its star power
and head coach.
Yeah, and head coach. So there's definitely a potential playoff spot right there that should be ripe for the picking for Rowlett, and then ditto with Flower Mound in 6-6A. I know that's one of those districts where you have to factor in. I mean, Irving MacArthur's going to be loaded next year with Sarah Henders and Hannah Gusters, and then you factor in what Louisville and Hebron, the strides that they took. There could be a spot there between, I believe it was either Capella or Marcus that took it last year, but Flower Mound could be positioned to seize that last playoff spot. I think. Were there any others that you guys wanted to throw out there as far as teams that you foresee making the playoffs?
I guess we can mention Lake Dallas. There's one program I think at Lake Dallas that qualifies for this, and that's the girls soccer team. You mentioned Allen volleyball and kind of the injury bug. Lake Dallas had a similar experience, had a lot of girls. Even if they weren't out for extended periods of time, they were kind of hamstrung and taken back a step by injuries and that sort of thing. And I believe they literally missed out on the postseason by 1 game underneath Denton. They bring back Karina DePauli, Sydney Frazier in goal. They bring back, those are their 2 leaders. Those are their 2, obviously Sydney Frazier started 2 seasons now in goal, and Karina DePauli is their unquestioned best scorer and probably most talented athlete. So, they bring them back. That district didn't particularly impress me outside of, Little Elm, who I think will continue to be good, but underneath them, it's kind of in flux, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if Lake Dallas gets back in the postseason next year. Addie Beesing, back on the team, really good athlete. So, they got some athletes, and if they can stay healthy, I could easily see them getting, probably 3rd or 4th, maybe as high as 2nd underneath. Who knows? But I think they have a pretty good shot.
Sticking with 8-5A, that volleyball district last year really wasn't that good. If you think about it, it was really top heavy, and then there was just a bunch of losing records. Teams with losing records make the playoffs, and Little Elm had a down year. They had to try to figure out how to replace Carrington Jones from 2 years ago, won district MVP, all that stuff. They had just such a young roster. Most of their star players were sophomores, or sophomores and juniors, I should say. Big senior class now this year. They were thrown into that fire. Yeah, they were 2-10. This is a different year. This is 2nd year under Amber Hughes. And you know what, I think, or 3rd year, I should say. And I think last year was just a bit of, having to deal with a little bit of growing pains, kind of not used to, they relied a lot on Carrington Jones. Now it's like, hey, we have this strong cast of senior supporters. They only lose, really, Habby, their center, Habby Vaglienti. Sorry if I butchered your name, Habby. But she was their senior setter last year. and they return pretty much everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think, especially if that district is going to be, from 3 to 7 is going to be similar, with teams hovering around that 500 line. I think Little M could snag a couple more wins like they did last year against, they beat the Colony last year. They gave teams like Lake Dallas a good run for their money. It's not like they were just getting destroyed. So I think they could maybe sneak in there in the conversation for 3 or 4 seed.
Awesome. I guess then we got one more question on the docket, and we'll take a quick break. Word from the sponsor and pick it up in just a moment. Today's podcast is brought to you by Star Local Media. 14 newspapers and websites with a print distribution of 270,000 homes and monthly page views of 600,000 online. Star Local Media, your community voice for news. And now, let's get back to the podcast. All right, let's continue to discuss another entry from our ongoing summer question series. This question: which sport, regardless of district, in 2019-20 is likely to produce the biggest difference in results from 2018-19? High school sports are cyclical, so what you see that's one of the beautiful parts of this job, is what you see one year does not necessarily mean that's going to be the case the following year. So there's a lot of these districts that are going to have some pretty significant turnover from last year. So let's, where do we kind of land on this? Let's just throw out a 9-6. We had some 9-6A discussion that was very back and forth, a bunch of potential candidates. You look at girls basketball. You mentioned softball earlier on the podcast. I think it's a case though that football could be just all sorts of just influx as far as what to expect. And I think even at this juncture, with spring football in the past, we've already been talking up the coaches, trying to at least get a gauge on what these teams might have. And I mean, we're in, it's about to be July, and we still don't have much of a clue as to what this district's going to hold.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned girls basketball. You look at, I think that's uncertain in a different way, just because you lose so much top end talent and all those McDonald's All-Americans and nominees and everything. But football, just in general, man, everybody is just one big question mark right now. Even Allen. Allen is Allen, but at the same time, they roll over more than they probably have in who knows how many years.
It's been a while since they've had this.
They're probably going to win the district. They're Allen.
Who returns their quarterback? Which teams?
Plano West.
And that's it. And they may not even start the same quarterback because it's a brand new head coach and Tyler Sokup and a brand new competition.
So we could see
every single team,
brand new quarterbacks.
Yeah, potentially every single team. And you say brand new, some of them have been in the program at least.
Oh yeah.
But,
I meant
Allen's going to roll out Raylan Sharp, who saw probably more time than a backup quarterback in the state last year.
So that's technically new, and there's some other situations like that. Even at West, if they go with, say, Will Cannon starts over Danny Davis the majority of the time, it's not like he didn't play last year. But yeah, pretty much every team in the district will look completely different under center and completely different in a ton of ways. And that's kind of the crazy part. There's really no plan for how this is going to shake out, how this is going to roll over. Because some districts you look at and be like, it's going to be really different, but I bet I can predict how it's going to be different. And I'm sure we'll get to some of those. But as far as 9-6A football, it's just like, it's one big question mark, and I think it'll continue to be until we actually see some of this play out.
Just, stylistically, you think that how different a program, like a team like Plano East is going to look last year. East, which had one of the most, prolific passing offenses in the area last season. They're going to be much more of a run-based offense centered around Trey Jones Scott. Allen has, you had Grant Tisdale, who was one of the most efficient passers in the state last year, and just an absolute wrecking ball whenever he decided to, tuck the ball and run. But then you have Raylan Sharp, who brings more speed to that position than any quarterback that Allen's had since Kyler Murray, and just the different things that you can do with that. Their offense is going to look much different. How Plano looks without a player like Kyron Cumbie there, who is just, the absolute home run threat of home run threats in that district, and just all that he brought to the backfield and the receiving game. Now they do have a guy in Tylen Hines who sounds like he might be able to approximate some of that, but without Kyron Cumbie, that's one of the most versatile skill players that Plano has ever had, and without that, you have to imagine that it's going to be a bit of a different look in some cases.
What was that stat on Kyron Cumbie that you had?
That he averaged 8.5 yards per carry for his career.
Yeah. Way more than Rex Burkhead.
Which is 2.5 yards more than Burkhead or Brandon Stevens. That's
tough to replace.
That is really tough.
Even Plano West though is going to look completely different. I'm not saying the results are going to be there, but from day one, Coach Sukup has come in and said, we're going to throw the football. They could not throw the football last year. It's just a fact. They did not throw the football well. pretty much in any game. They had like next to no success, but they bring back athletes. Tavares Garland is a big kid. He's like 6'3", 6'4", athletic. You know, they have some guys with talent under center throwing the ball if they can get them to, just figure out something. So even West is going to look, like I said, I'm not saying that they're going to go from 0-10 to even 500. It's not going to happen in 1 year, but stylistically in the way that they approach trying to win football games, even they're going to be completely different. I mean, every team in the district is going to look significantly different.
It's a case where you could wind up with potentially 3 brand new playoff teams.
It wouldn't shock me at all.
Like, no matter what kind of how uncertain Allen is, it would just be the most stunning development of developments if Allen somehow missed the playoffs in that district.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
No. You mentioned 9-6A girls basketball, and while, like you said, it's going to be different, but in a different way than football, because, there's no way to get around the fact that not having 3 McDonald's All-Americans in that district is going to cause a drastic change in identity for at least 3 of those programs. With what Nia Green brought to Allen, Jordan Oliver to Prosper, Jade Owens to Plano West. 3 players that were just the alpha and omega of their
that's not
their
even mentioning Tabby Diggs either. Who was nominated for that game, didn't go play in it, but the same kind of player for Plano East and going to TCU, and that was the arguably the 4th best player in the district, and maybe the 5th behind Jordan Mayer. That's how good that district was.
Mary's probably going to be playing in that game.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's what I mean. So that district was insane. You can't take away that much talent and have it look anything close to what it was.
But a team like Prosper, Brian, you've seen Prosper a bunch over the years, and just with how much revolved around Oliver in that program, there's still going to be talent, and this is kind of the verdict that I arrive at. Teams like Allen, Prosper, East, they're going to lose really significant players, but there's still enough there to where I don't know if ultimately the playoff teams might still be the same. It just might be in a different order, or just the way in which the season materializes. The gap might shrink a bit from that upper tier to the rest of the district. But a team like Prosper, though, where do you kind of foresee them going now in the post-Jordan Oliver era?
In case Coach Rochelle's watching this, I don't want to hurt his feelings, but they won't make the regional tournament without Oliver this year. They're going to be a playoff team. They just won't make the 5th round. Oliver was that good. I'm not saying they solely relied on her, but when you have a player of that caliber, of course, you're going to say, hey, take over the reins. I saw her score 8 straight points in the 4th quarter against Allen, in that epic game, late in the season. But they still return a lot of talent.
Oh, yeah. That's why I've said I don't think they're going to...
Maddie Cleary is one of the best shooters, not just female or male. She was one of the best shooters I saw in high school, period. That girl could light it up. There's, Hadley Morrell, freshman. She played significant minutes. She was a defensive stopper. I believe a younger sister of Easton Morrell, the star baseball player from a few years ago, as well. Scout Huffman.
Better post players in that district.
Seriously, she's got a lot of size there, especially what you need in the post there in high school basketball. They have some returning players. They won't have that superstar firepower, but they have a good supporting cast, that they're gonna have to step up. They're gonna have to play bigger roles, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier this week in our athlete series. But I expect players like Maddie Cleary. She's gonna get more shots. She averaged a little over 11 points per game last year. I could see that number bumping up a little bit, maybe close to 15, 16. So I don't expect Prosper to dip too much, but a trip to the regional tournament, I'm not so sure.
But yeah, kind of the same thing with Allen. The problem is that you lose a player that could just, if you ever needed a bucket, and they just made it look so easy and effortless.
If you have that one player, you can go so far. And if you have, obviously, you see it in the NBA. Obviously, I'm not comparing high school to NBA, but basketball is more simple. You only have 5 people on the court.
Absolutely.
If you have that superstar, boom. Where you're already an elite state contender, but
and you could say that it's even more true at the high school level, just because if you get a blue chip top flight prospect, that the talent level just from a player like that is it stands out so much more at the high school level than it does with the pros, where everybody is amazing. But you look at a team like Allen, which how many easier buckets were there than just putting the ball in Nia Green's hands and just letting her cook with her her mid-range jumper game and whatnot.
The few times I saw her play, she would shoot Kobe fadeaways, long 2-pointers that are not necessarily high percentage shots, and she'd take the shot and I'm like, girl, what are you doing? And it would go in. I'm like, well, hey, it's Nia Green. You do what you do.
Yeah, some players are just good at making those shots. But yeah, but I mean, I think Allen's still positioned to be pretty good. I mean, they still do bring back a lot from that team that did go to the state semifinals last year. You know, Tyler Jackson, Zoe McCrary, some of their younger players like Alyssa Tarpley, Alicia Mills. I mean, there's still plenty there for them to still work. And I mean, but who knows how that'll compare to a team like Plano, which is one of the teams that brings back its superstar, and with Jordan Merritt and Maggie Robbins and that team that went 3 rounds deep. And granted, they do lose Zaria Collins, and that's pretty big from a defensive standpoint, plus rebounding, but they're still pretty well positioned. It's just a district that's like, the teams are still going to be good just because a lot of these teams are still deep, but not having that just surefire, bulletproof go-to score. Like, that's just going to make things a little bit harder on these teams as far as generating offense.
Would y'all say Plano's the early favorite?
If you just simply put on just best player, best team, and whatnot, and I mean, just having Jordan Merritt, who's going to be up for a McDonald's All-American spot next year, most likely. They'll still be pretty solid, you would think. What about 8-5A boys basketball? You talk about a district that could have a completely different look to it from last year. As far as star power went, basically what the 9-6A girls basketball equivalent on the boys side was 8-5A, because you covered this district, Brian. Where do you even begin with all the star power this district had last year that's not there this year?
So look at Northwest, the district champion. Yeah. They went the furthest. Avery Anderson, he's off to Oklahoma State. No more Sammy Freeman, no more 6'10" post player to rely on. They bring back Julian Smith. I remember him being one of their key guys from the few times I saw them play. But they also lose another guard named Kevin Cash, I believe. He was a big time point guard for them alongside Avery Anderson. You got to think Northwest takes a step back. You don't have that superstar like we just mentioned. The Colony, they lose a good amount of their starters as well. Bryce Okpo, who just emerged as a beast this year. I don't remember what superlative he got, but he was he would have been an MVP candidate in a lot of other districts that don't have Avery Anderson and RJ Hampton. Their starting point guard Luis Rodriguez, and they return a couple guys. I'm not too familiar with the rest of the Colony's roster. Justin isn't here to tell me out with that, but. They lose some big guys. And then I haven't even mentioned Little Elm. The obvious is RJ Hampton, but you lose, off the top of my head, they lose 4 of their 5 starters in the starting lineup. Dre Rose, Will Harris, Brandon Crossley, who are all football studs. They're all going to go play college football somewhere.
And that's not even mentioning Trey White, who was expected to be the heir apparent to RJ.
Yes. Don't get me started. If Trey White was there in the playoffs, I think they could have beaten Timberview. They only lost by 6. Yeah. But that's a different debate. That's a different debate. So you could have been looking at a team with RJ Hampton in his quote unquote senior year next year and Trey White as a sophomore who already committed to Kansas. Now you're going to have this entirely new look in the starting lineup at Little Elm. You have a new head coach in Dominic Parker. How are they going to look? What are they going to do?
Oh yeah.
The Northwest, the Colony, Little Elm. I don't know. That leaves, we talked a little bit earlier, a team like Denton Broswell, who has a lot of young talent, finished 4th in that district. They had a lot of close games with teams like the Colony, with Little Elm, Northwest as well. I have no idea. If I had to predict how that district's going to go, I could not even tell you that. Little Elm could miss the playoffs. Northwest could miss the playoffs. The Colony, I don't know. It's mind-blowing how crazy different that district could look next year.
And then Braswell only lost 8 games last year, despite finishing 4th in that district. So 2 games in non-district play. They absolutely dominated their preseason schedule. And I'm guessing those 6 losses all came to those aforementioned 3 teams above them in the standings. And with them all presumably taking a step back, Braswell, a team that...
Braswell even beat Little Elm when they didn't have RJ Hampton.
Okay.
Because RJ Hampton missed a couple games with a groin injury, and that was one of Little Elm's rare losses. It was to that Denton Broswell team, so they're no joke.
Yeah, they got a lot of sophomores, a lot of juniors on the team last year, and they should be primed to take a big step forward in the wake of these other teams losing some pretty key pieces. Let's see, one other district, I kind of alluded to this earlier, I think 10-6A boys basketball could have a very different look to it, just because, again, like we mentioned with just these superstar prospects, and Tyrese Maxey was, that's the best player to ever pass through South Garland. Chris Harris is probably the second best player to ever pass through South Garland.
And they leave at the same time. time, and then they lose their head coach. Yeah. So it's like, what?
I mean, so, and it's not like that's, South Garland, with all due respect to just what they've accomplished in these past 4 years during the Maxie Harris era, before, prior to this 4-year run, they had only gotten out of the last time they had gotten out of the first round of the playoffs was 2008. So it's not a program that has a really entrenched, run of playoff success. So, I mean, they're obviously going to take a step back, significant enough to where they fall out of the playoff picture altogether. Who knows? That could be where a team like Rowlett sneaks in. But, you look at a team like Saxe, which is, back on the upswing and whatnot with the new head coach, Zach Meixel. And, I mean, yeah, that's a district that just because you had this glass ceiling for so long with South Garland and just Tyrese Maxey and Chris Harris and just death taxes in that program, just running roughshod over that district, a team like Wiley could be positioned to take a big step forward. So I don't know, that's a district that I think could also have a very, very different look to it next season.
Sticking with basketball, real quick, 958 girls basketball.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Liberty just went to state. Pretty much their entire starting lineup was all seniors. I could list them all, but I don't think we have enough time. I know Ross Reedy does a tremendous job with this, with that program. They, after losing Jordan Hamilton and Rebecca Liskay a couple years ago when they made a run at state, and then reloading the way they have, he's a phenomenal coach. He knows what he's doing. And then you look at Lone Star, they lose the district MVP in Adriana Quezada. They lose Leah Harris, Kayla Richardson, all these studs, and they lost obviously Mallory Adams a couple years ago, but they had a nice chunk, an MVP caliber player and a good cast of role players to take over. Yeah, you have Mia Deck's little sister. She was a freshman last year. She's going to be a key player next year as a sophomore. But, they also have a new head coach, Katie Stinton. She left. It's like, is Lone Star going to are they still going to be Lone Star? Are they still? They're still going to be good. Oh, yeah. But are they still going to be 17-1, ranked top 5 in the state good? Is Liberty going to be great? Are they going to be, state title contender like they have been? They'll still be good. Jazzy Owens-Barnett is a player to watch for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But you have other players like, other teams like Memorial made the playoffs last year, almost beat Wiley East in the first round. They have some studs. Jasmine Lott is a baller. She's a freshman as well. She's been in a lot of these, these camps, and I know I believe her and Jazzy Owens-Barnett. I don't know if they know. I think I've seen some stuff with them together on Twitter or not. But Memorial is going to be really good. Centennial returns a lot of talent. You could see a combination of Centennial, Memorial up at the top. Maybe I don't know, but yeah, I don't expect it to be Lone Star Liberty and then everyone else like it has been the last 3 years.
Yeah, that's why it has been a long time since those two have just lorded over that district. Okay, I guess were there any others, or is that kind of where?
I think those are the big ones. At least. There's plenty, but I think those are the big ones for sure.
And I can talk basketball all day, man.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the podcast. We'll be back on Monday. I guess we'll probably have 2 more questions to discuss and whatnot as we continue our just the build to the upcoming school year, folks. So hey, y'all enjoy the rest of your week, and we will talk to y'all later.